Ayla walked through the gates of the new school like someone who already knew the weight of stepping into unfamiliar ground. The wide hallways, the loud lockers, the cliques formed by looks and status all felt like an unspoken code. The kind of place where the silence of those who don't fit says more than any clever sentence. Her curly hair bounced with confidence at every step, and her eyes. Oh, they didn't ask permission, they said. I'm here, and I won't hide. Ayla's life was never about comfort. From a young age, she knew what it meant to grow up with longing. Her mother died giving birth to her younger sister when Ayla was just 4. She was raised by her father, a simple, hardworking man who took on raising 3 kids like a quiet warrior. He worked 2 jobs, hotel maintenance during the day and a restaurant at night to make sure nothing was missing. But some things were missing: a mother's touch, time, and sometimes even words. Her older brother, Davi, was 3 years ahead and naturally became a figure of protection. Her little sister, Luna, was a mix of absence and responsibility. Ayla grew up in the space between caring for Luna and sitting through serious talks with her dad, who often taught more through his eyes than through big speeches. He was a black belt in karate, but he didn't use that as a shield, he used it as a compass. Ayla didn't learn to hit first. She learned to stand. Arriving at that school, where almost everyone was white with last names that opened doors, Ayla didn't feel afraid. She felt familiar. She'd already faced loss, carried responsibility, and matured faster than she should have. Nothing here was truly new. What was new, maybe, was the type of attention she got. Sideways looks, fake smiles, whispered comments. She didn't need to hear it all to understand. She'd read this script before. Within days, she figured out how the social structure worked. It was rigid, almost mechanical. There was a group that ruled and a group that obeyed. Some stood out, others disappeared. In the middle of it all, she didn't belong to either side. The popular kids, led by guys like Logan, ruled the halls. The invisible ones kept their heads down. Ayla walked in the opposite direction. She moved at her own pace, shoulders back and chin high. She didn't speak much, but she didn't have to. Her body language said it all. I'm not here to blend in. And that was disruptive. People who were used to having power through fear were thrown off. It was like someone had placed a mirror in the middle of the school, reflecting everything that had gone unquestioned. Ayla simply existed. And that existence caused quiet disruption. What no one had dared to challenge before started to creak. There was something about the way she moved that hinted at discipline, something in her eyes that made even the boldest hesitate. It was the mark of someone who had learned to breathe deeply before reacting, to listen more than respond. Coming from a home where her father trained focus between work shifts, Ayla absorbed the principles of karate long before learning the names of the moves. Being among teens who valued appearances and status felt almost like a silent mission. She watched everything. Who laughed too loudly, who pretended not to see, who was always the target. And even though she hadn't chosen to be there, something told her she had a role to play. The environment seemed ripe for change. Not a rebellion, but a reset. And that shift wouldn't begin with speeches, but with subtle actions. Presence, eye contact. Ayla embodied all of it, without ever needing to say so. As the days went by, the stares grew. Students tried to figure out who this girl was, the one who didn't smile for no reason, but didn't seem sad either. The mystery around her deepened, but so far, no one had dared to confront her. Yet every system resists change. And when power feels threatened, it strikes back. That's when Logan, the inflated Digo golden boy, decided to test his own limits. The classroom felt like an invisible testing ground. Lined chairs, open books, forced smiles. Ayla sat in the back where she could observe without drawing too much attention, though that was impossible. The teacher spoke about American history, but the real focus was elsewhere. The boy with the backward cap and the smirk of someone who's never heard no. Logan, son of wealthy business owners, captain of the football team, and used to being the center of the universe. He noticed Ayla on the third day, like someone spotting a piece out of place. It wasn't common for someone to not laugh at his jokes or lower their eyes when he walked by. She didn't either. She didn't laugh, didn't react. She simply held his gaze when he tried a corny joke during class. It was a short moment, but the silence said it all. Logan, of course, didn't take it well. His ego had no idea what to do with someone who wasn't impressed. After class, he crossed her path in the hallway, threw out a snide comment, the kind laced with false charm, expecting her to flinch or at least feel belittled. Ayla stopped, turned slowly, and looked him straight in the eye. She didn't yell, didn't get sarcastic, didn't challenge him. She just responded with a short, sharp sentence, truthful and cutting. Her tone was calm, but her firmness was like steel. The effect was instant. Logan laughed, but it was the kind of awkward laugh that hides a bruised ego, his friends behind. Him expected Ayla to back down. She didn't. She turned and kept walking, like she had better things to do. And that, more than any loud comeback, threw them off. They were facing something unfamiliar, someone who wasn't afraid of them. In the days that followed, the atmosphere changed. The looks became longer, the provocations more subtle. Logan started making veiled jokes about Ayla during class, trying to trigger her, but she remained steady like a deep river, unmoved at the surface. It was clear she heard everything but chose silence, strategic silence that watched more than it absorbed. That was even more unsettling for those who thrived on noise. There was something about Ayla that made it obvious. This wasn't her first time facing conflict. Maybe it was because she'd already dealt with far more than high school bullies. Losing her mother young, watching her father leave before dawn and return exhausted, caring for her little sister while staying on top of school, ... That all taught her that the real enemy doesn't wear trendy sneakers or backward caps, and that perspective shaped her strength. Strength you don't explain, you feel. Logan, on the other hand, had never had to prove himself. He always had a crowd, pats on the back, and applause on demand. So, when faced with someone who wasn't impressed, he suddenly felt small. Ayla wasn't like the others. She wasn't there to beat anyone, but she also wouldn't let anyone beat her. It just wasn't part of her vocabulary. She knew that. Confrontation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's posture. Posture she had plenty of. The teachers began to sense the tension. Logan talking more than usual, creating forced, awkward moments. But Ayla never lost her composure. She respected the limits, but never shrank. That made some classmates begin to notice something different about her. A presence, a steadiness. Something that inspired, even unintentionally. And those who had stayed silent for too long were beginning to pay attention in that tense yet controlled environment. The first spark had been lit. A quiet seed had been planted. The idea that maybe it was possible to resist without breaking. And Ayla, without even trying, was planting it in the hearts of those who had been living small. But what no one knew was that the attacks had only just begun. The teasing began like someone testing a fence before crossing it. Nothing direct. Snickers when Ayla walked by, offhand comments in the hallways, books pushed off the edge of her desk. It was the kind of attack that didn't leave visible marks, but the intention was clear: wear her down, bit by bit. Logan and his crew operated in that quiet space where cruelty hides behind a smirk. On Monday, Ayla was walking to class when one of Logan's friends bumped into her. Without looking back, he laughed and said loudly, "Watch it, ninja. Gonna break someone with that death stare?" The group behind him burst out laughing. Ayla paused for a moment, looked the boy in the eye, and replied calmly, "To do that, someone would need to be worth the energy." Then she kept walking. Her quiet response hit louder than any scream. Sometimes her books would mysteriously slip off her desk. Other times, she'd find sticky notes on her backpack with phrases like, "Go back to the jungle," or "Animals belong in zoos." Venomous words disguised as jokes, but she knew what they were. It wasn't just racism. Fear of someone who didn't bow. Fear often wears the mask of mockery. In the hallways, shoulder bumps happened almost daily. Nothing that would alert a teacher, but enough to cause discomfort. One day Logan brushed past her and muttered, "New girl acts all tough. But I bet it's just a show, huh?" Ayla looked at him, no words, no reaction. Her silence wasn't Weakness it was strategy. She was observing. As those who observe in silence know exactly when to strike. But the most curious thing was the effect she had. Even under pressure, students who used to feel invisible began to notice her. The way she walked with purpose, the way she organized her materials, how she kept her eyes on the teacher even with giggles in the background. There was a kind of quiet dignity that stirred, something in those who'd gone unnoticed for too long. They began to wonder, is it possible to resist too? Jasmine was the first to exchange a silent glance with Ayla in the hallway. No words were said, but something was understood.
Victor, no.
The library, Phenophan mocked for his red hair, lowered his eyes when he heard Ayla shut down a cruel joke with class. Later, he mumbled to himself, that girl's different. And Miles, the tech nerd, once left a discreet sticky note under her desk. If you ever need help with computers, ... I'm good at it. While the bullying continued, Ayla started to map things out. Who were the leaders? Who followed? Who watched? She'd learned this at home. Before any defense, you study the terrain. And even though everything inside her screamed for a reaction, she remembered her father's words. You don't win by shouting. The one who doesn't lose balance wins. Logan, on the other hand, seemed frustrated by her lack of reaction. She thinks she's better than everyone, he said in the locker room. Walking around with that look like she's above it all. One day she'll crack. What he didn't understand was that Ayla wasn't trying to be superior. She just refused to be inferior. And for someone who built his power on others' submission, that was a real threat. The school atmosphere slowly began to shift. Silence in the corners turned into observant eyes. Students who once kept their heads down started watching Ayla's posture like they'd found a compass. And though the shoves still came, they didn't hit the same. Something was being planted, quietly. But before anything grows, it needs time. And Ayla was just starting to water it. Ayla never approached out of pity. She approached out of recognition. She began to notice faces that, like hers, didn't smile easily. People who moved along the edges, who avoided attention, who knew silence as a form of shelter. One day, in one of those hallways, she crossed paths with Jasmine, a black girl with lowered eyes and short, quiet steps. Ayla paused, gave a subtle smile, and said, "Hey, I like your style." Jasmine didn't know what to say, but she smiled back. And that was a beginning. Finn came onto Ayla's radar when someone shouted a nickname at him, Albino Scarecrow. He shrugged and pretended not to hear, but Ayla heard. She stood still for a moment watching, then she walked over and said, "I like your hair. It has personality." He hesitated, then replied softly, You? You really think so?" Simply nodded, as if to say, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone." From that day on, he started looking for her during breaks. Miles was the most isolated of the three. Always alone, always with some device in hand. Smart, talented, but used by the bullies like a tool, not a person. One day, Alice saw him handing over a spreadsheet to Logan, who didn't even say thank you. Later, she approached and asked, "Why do you help someone who doesn't even look at you?" Without lifting his eyes, he replied, "Because it's easier than saying no." Ayla calmly said, "I can help you with that." They didn't know exactly what brought them together, but they felt safe around Ayla. She didn't try to fix them. She just treated them with respect. And that was something new. During breaks, they started sitting near her. They didn't talk much, but they felt like they could simply be themselves. Jasmine began to hold her head a little higher. Finn cracked a quiet joke. Miles shared a programming fact. Ayla just listened, like someone watering a plant without rushing. On a rainy day, they were stuck under the covered patio due to flooding. That's when Ayla, sitting cross-legged on the ground, said, "My dad always says everyone has a strength they haven't discovered yet." Jasmine asked, "What if we never discover it?" Ayla smiled softly and replied, "Sometimes you need someone else to believe first until you believe too." The sentence lingered in the air like perfume after rain. Finn admitted he hated mirrors. "I feel ... weird. I always have." Miles said he wanted to belong somewhere but never knew where he fit. Jasmine said very little, but it was enough. I just want to go one day without feeling afraid. Ayla listened without interrupting. When everyone finished, she looked at them and said, I know exactly what you mean. For the first time, they all felt truly seen. In the following weeks, they began walking together through the hallways, not glued together, but close. Glances exchanged, quick smiles. Their presence started to bother some of the popular kids. So now she's got a club of losers? Girl said. Ayla heard and replied without hesitation, better that than a club of cowards. Then kept walking, her friends beside her. It wasn't about defiance, it was about belonging. Ayla started to realize something needed to be nurtured here. These fragile bonds were becoming stronger, but they were still like sprouts. And she knew from experience that when properly cared for, even a flower growing through asphalt could bloom. But flowers also know how to protect themselves. She would begin teaching them that, starting now. The group that started. Small was about to learn something powerful. Self-defense doesn't begin with punches. It begins with posture, with boundaries, with voice. And Ayla, who knew both silence and strength from within, was ready to show them the way. Ayla already knew. Courage doesn't always show up in shouting. Sometimes it shows up in the silence of someone who refuses to fall. That morning, she crossed the courtyard and saw Jasmine surrounded by two girls from the popular group. Of them was holding Jasmine's notebook, laughing, studying. What for? No one even notices you. The other mimicked her voice in a mocking tone. Jasmine kept her eyes down, hands clenched. But Ayla didn't hesitate. She walked over slowly, like someone who didn't need to rush to be seen. She stopped between Jasmine and the girls, calm body and steady voice. Give the notebook back. One of the girls smirked and said, And who are you supposed to be? The school's security. Ayla didn't blink. No. Just someone who knows when something's wrong. Her tone wasn't threatening, solid, dense. The words landed with a weight that made even the bystanders go quiet. The silence that followed was louder than any comeback. The girl dropped the notebook with disdain. Here it's not even worth it. Ayla picked it up, turned to Jasmine, and gently handed it over. You're good now. Shh. Jasmine, speechless, took the notebook with slightly shaking hands. That simple, direct action echoed throughout the courtyard. Students watching from a distance went quiet for a few seconds. A seed had been planted, and everyone saw it. After that, something shifted. Jasmine's timid eyes started seeking Ayla's in the halls, not with dependence, but with gratitude. It was like she'd discovered she didn't have to walk alone anymore. A day later, she approached Ayla in the library and whispered, Thank you for yesterday. Ayla replied, We look out for each other. That's how it starts. And with that, she drew the first line of a new group. Finn saw all of it and wanted in. During science class, he sat at the same lab bench as Ayla and Jasmine. He didn't say much, but he smiled more. When someone made a joke about his hair, Ayla turned and looked the person straight in the eye. No words needed. The laugh died immediately. Finn glanced at her and murmured, You make it look easy. Ayla replied, It's not easy. But it's right, and left it at that. Miles showed up days later. He watched from a distance, afraid of being rejected again. But when Ayla saw him hesitate at the computer lab door, she simply nodded, as if saying, Come on. And he did. They started talking there between code and circuit boards. He told her he liked making games, and Ayla replied, A good game always needs strategy. So does life. She smiled. Miles chuckled quietly. For the first time in weeks in the hallways, people started to notice. Shoves stopped having effect. When someone bumped into Ayla, she stayed balanced, held eye contact, and kept walking. That rattled the bullies. Who does she think she is? Someone asked. She knows exactly who she is, someone else replied from a distance. It wasn't rebellion, it was composure. And composure, spreads.ayl, became a reference for the invisible. Not through speeches, through action. She defended without fighting, stood firm without aggression, and taught through example. Jasmine started saying no more often. Finn now walked with his chest open. Miles, without realizing it, had started lifting his head more naturally. They were learning not from theory, but from practice, and this was only the beginning. The school, still divided, was starting to hear the first echoes of change. A subtle shift, made of small but powerful gestures. And Ayla, without ever calling herself a leader, knew she was building something bigger than herself. But for it to truly grow, it was time to move beyond instinct. It was time to get organized. And the next step would come with a proposal no one saw coming. Ayla knew that real strength isn't built with punches. She saw it at home, in her father's tired hands, who even after long shifts found time to teach discipline and balance. One day after class, she called Jasmine, Finn, and Miles to stay a bit longer in the courtyard. "Do you trust me?" she asked. They looked at each other and nodded. Ayla smiled. "Then let's start something different." They met at the empty gym, still wearing their school clothes. Ayla took off her hoodie, tied back her curly hair, and stepped into the center. "Before anything else, we need to learn how to breathe, how to stay focused, how to be present." Jasmine laughed nervously. "Is this like meditation?" Ayla replied. "It's more like survival." She led them through a simple breathing and posture exercise. The three followed awkwardly, but they were listening. After that came the first movements. No punches, just how to stay grounded, how to step with confidence, how to stand in a balanced way. "Is this karate?" Finn asked. "It's the beginning," Ayla replied. "My dad taught me the foundation is what holds everything, and if you have foundation, no one knocks you down easily." Miles studied her feet, trying to copy. Jasmine adjusted her shoulders. Their bodies were slowly aligning with something they couldn't name yet. In the following days, they started meeting more often. They didn't tell anyone. It was like a precious secret. Ayla brought simple but powerful lessons. How to use your gaze, how to stand your ground in a conflict, how to say no without shouting. "Self-defense starts before the punch," she'd say. "It starts in how you walk into a room." Finn started walking with a straighter chest. Jasmine stopped staring at the floor. Miles began speaking more clearly in class. One afternoon, after practice, Ayla sat with them under the bleachers and shared something personal. "When my mom died, I was really confused. I thought the world had stolen something from me. But my dad said I had a choice. I could become the loss or become what was good that remained from her." The group went quiet. Finn broke the silence with, "That explains a lot." Ayla smiled softly. "And you guys also have something good to show." The group, small but strong, started forming a bond you wouldn't find in the popular cliques. They knew each other's wounds but didn't see each other as victims. They were learning to grow stronger together. Miles built an app to track their training. Jasmine suggested rotating practice spaces to stay discreet. Finn came up with a set of code words for when someone was being targeted. Ayla watched all of it with quiet pride. One day, while training in an old dance room, Jasmine fell during an exercise. There was a brief silence. Then, she got up herself and said, "Again." Ayla looked at her, eyes full of respect, and said, "That's what I call strength." Finn clapped. Miles smiled. It wasn't just about physical defense, it was about reclaiming their bodies, their voices, their space in the world. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Students began to see that the once invisible kids now walked differently. Their eyes held more focus. Timidness was giving way to presence. "They're different," some said in the hallways. "What's going on with them?" But no one really knew. It was like something was being built in the shadows, away from the spotlight. And it was. Ayla knew it was still early to call it a group, but it was already much more than friendship. It was partnership. It was shield. It was foundation. They were growing strong together, not to dominate anyone, but because they refused to keep being dominated. And that, sooner or later, would catch the attention of those at the top. What started with 4 people in silence slowly began to draw attention, not through noise or speeches, through presence. Jasmine now made eye contact. Finn no longer walked hunched over. Miles spoke with clarity, and Ayla was still the same, but somehow her strength now seemed to multiply in others. One day after class, a boy named Theo approached. He wore oversized clothes, kept his eyes low, and had a tired expression. "Are you guys ... like doing some kind of group?" he asked. Finn replied, "It's more like training. Also, I don't know, support." Ayla looked at Theo and said, "You want to get stronger?" He nodded. "Then come on. We start with breathing." By the end of that week, there were already 7, then 10. Some came out of curiosity, others came in silence, simply because it felt like a safe space. Ayla always explained from the start, no one's forced to do anything here, but everyone learns to stand tall. Each new person brought a new story, and every training session was different, shaped by what the group needed at the time. Jasmine started helping Ayla lead exercises. She showed how to stay firm even when nervous. Finn took charge of the physical warm-ups and stretches. Miles managed the system he had created now, with a sign-up page, schedule, and even weekly reminders. It was like each one naturally found their role. Ayla watched it all and said, "This is turning into something real." Even those who didn't train began to notice the change. In the hallways, the group walked together, not showing off, just steady. The popular kids began to notice that their easy targets weren't so easy anymore. One day, a girl from Logan's crew complained, "So now everyone's with Ayla?" Another replied, "If it means not getting humiliated every day, it's worth it." Power balance was starting to shift. During a practice in the old dance room, Ayla addressed the group. "What we do here isn't to hurt anyone. It's to make sure no one hurts you again." A new boy, voice trembling, said, "I've never felt like I belonged anywhere." Ayla answered gently, "Then it starts now." The silence that followed was filled with meaning. For the first time, many of them saw themselves as part of something bigger. The group began organizing on their own. They created a group chat called Strong Base. It's where they scheduled meets, asked questions, and even vented. Miles built a section for anonymous stories. Ayla read it quietly and said, "This might save someone's life, and we won't even know it." Jasmine, eyes watering, replied, "It already has." With time, the group's energy spilled beyond the training sessions. Teachers began noticing changes in the students. Better grades, more participation. Kids who used to stay in the background, now leading group projects. The coordinator called Ayla into her office and asked, "What exactly are you doing after school?" Ayla replied, "Just helping some people see themselves again," and left without waiting for praise. But that growth didn't go unnoticed by those who fed off other people's silence. Logan and his friends were now seriously bothered. "Who does she think she is? Trying to change everything here?" he asked, irritation thick in his voice. And what began as quiet bullying was about to become an open attack. What started as annoyance turned into a warning. Logan and the rest of the popular crowd began to feel like they were losing ground. They were no longer the only ones admired in the hallways. Some of the people who used to laugh with them now just walked past. Others avoided them altogether. "I'm starting to think this girl thinks she runs the place," Logan said, slamming his backpack onto the locker room bench. Ayl, on the other hand, stayed exactly the same. She didn't talk about them, didn't react to the jabs, just kept going with the group, the trainings, the calm stares, and that was exactly what irritated them most. "She doesn't even say anything and everyone's already on her side," one of the popular girls muttered. They were used to controlling people through fear. Now they faced something new, respect earned through example. The rumors began quietly. People whispered that Ayla was doing it all to get attention, that she was some activist in disguise, that she was using the losers to climb the social ladder. Someone even spread that the only reason she was respected was because she threatened people with karate. "She's not strong, she's dangerous," someone said in the hallway. But none of it stuck. Anyone who knew Ayla knew she had never threatened anyone. She didn't have to. One day, a group of boys passed her and Jasmine in the cafeteria and said loudly, "Look, the general and her army of losers. Ayla didn't stop walking, but Jasmine clenched her fist. "Want me to say something to them?" she asked. Ayla replied, "No. Let them talk." "People who shout don't have control." That sentence echoed in Jasmine's mind for days, and in the ears of everyone around them, the provocations became more public. Logan started making comments during class, throwing jabs right in front of the teachers. "Some people think discipline means going around kicking people," he said. One day, looking directly at Ayla, she just raised her eyes, held his gaze for 3 seconds, and went back to writing. It was like a silent strike. The room went quiet. Even the teacher didn't know what to say. One of the most intense moments happened during a group presentation. Ayla was with Jasmine, Miles, and 2 other members of Base Fort. While they spoke, a student from the audience shouted, "Go on, show us what you learned in ninja school." Ayla paused, looked at the crowd, and calmly said, "Here, we learn to listen, and only respond when it's worth it." The class went silent. The coordinator, watching from the back, just smiled. But even with all that poise, Ayla could feel the tension growing. She noticed Logan's group was reorganizing, less teasing, more strategy. They started occupying the same spaces, blocking rooms, spreading misinformation. "They're not just annoyed anymore, they're scared," Finn said during one of the trainings. Ayla replied, "People who are scared move in the dark." Miles received an anonymous message on the app. "If you're all so tough, why not face us for real?" There was no sender, but they all knew where it came from. Jasmine wanted to pause the sessions just in case. "What if it gets dangerous?" she asked. Ayla thought for a second, then answered, "That's why. We train not to attack, but to be ready." The tension rose to a point where it felt like something big was coming. The stares, the comments, the manipulation of space, everything pointed to Logan planning something. Ayla, watching it all silently, simply told the group, "When it comes, we'll be ready." And in that "when," there was no doubt. The confrontation wasn't a possibility anymore. It was just a matter of time. That morning, something felt different. The hallways were quieter, as if the whole school was holding its breath. Ayla's group walked together, like always. But this time, she could feel too many eyes, too many whispers. Jasmine glanced around and muttered, "They're up to something." Ayla simply replied with calm, "Then we stick to what we do. Stay steady." The ambush came during lunch break. Logan, flanked by his crew, blocked Ayla's path right in the middle of the courtyard. Several students stopped. "Hey Ayla, want to show everyone what you've got?" he yelled, loud enough to echo. Someone pulled out a phone. Others followed. "What now? Gonna run? Or finally fight for real?" He sneered like a man setting up his stage. Ayla didn't answer. Groups stepped closer, tense. Finn shifted his weight, ready to step in. Miles scanned the scene, calculating. Jasmine clenched her fists, but Ayla slowly raised her hand, asking everyone to stay still. She looked Logan in the eyes and said clearly and calmly, "I have nothing to prove to you." But he stepped forward and shoved her hard, trying to push her over the edge. She took 2 steps back, but didn't lose her balance. Her body already knew what to do. She breathed deeply, feet planted firmly. Logan lunged again. This time Ayla shifted to the side, and with a precise, controlled move, used his momentum against him. Logan fell to the ground, not hurt, just off balance. Every phone captured the moment. No cuts. Silence dropped like a curtain. Logan sat stunned. Ayla remained standing, calm and centered. "Are you okay?" she asked. And there was no mockery, no challenge, just human concern. A school staff member ran over. But by then, the footage was already out. The story no longer belonged to just them. The group circled around her. Jasmine came close and whispered, emotional, "You didn't hurt him, even though you could have." Ayla nodded. "Because what we do, it's not to harm." Miles held up his phone. The video was already spreading, hundreds of views in minutes. And what people saw was exactly what she always taught: self-defense with dignity. The school turned into a pressure cooker. Classes were paused. Teachers stood frozen. The administration rushed into action. Students gave statements. Some defended Logan. Most defended Ayla. But no one needed to argue. The video spoke for itself. Today, it showed aggression, restraint, and above all, maturity. The teacher quietly commented, "If everyone had that kind of awareness, this place would be different." Ayla sat quietly with her group, breathing deeply. "It changed, didn't it?" Finn asked with a half smile. Ayla replied, "I think now they see it. It wasn't arrogance. It was truth. What once went unseen was now undeniable. There was no going back. Something bigger had started. Something she didn't even fully understand yet." When the principal called her name from across the courtyard, Ayla stood up, but not alone. Jasmine stood with her. Then Miles, Finn, Theo, and 5 more. Then others, one by one. Those who used to walk with their heads down now stood shoulder to shoulder. For the first time, the whole school saw what it meant to build. A strong base. And the silence that followed was filled with respect. The next day, the school felt different. The gossip circles gave way to serious conversations. People weren't just talking about the video, but what it meant. "Did you see the way she kept her control?" One girl whispered in the hallway. "That was real courage," another replied. For the first time, Ayla wasn't being mentioned as a target or a threat, but as an example. Teachers, once distant, started asking about the group. Some wanted to know what she taught. Others wanted to know how she taught it. The administration asked to meet with her, not to punish, but to understand, they said. And when Ayla walked into the office, she wasn't alone. Jasmine, Miles, Finn, and others from the group walked in right behind her without needing to say a word. The principal closed her laptop, looked at them all, and said, "You've changed the energy in this school." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was the voice of someone witnessing a quiet revolution. "We just showed there's another way to walk through here," Ayla replied. The principal nodded, and then unexpectedly offered, "What if we made this official?" The group exchanged glances. Jasmine smiled, and so the club was born. Not a fight club, but a defense club. Physical, emotional, mental. Base Fort now had a room, a schedule, real support. Students who used to be afraid to speak now helped organize discussion circles. Miles began leading tech workshops. Jasmine created a mural filled with phrases from the group. "We exist, and we have a voice." That one stood bold across the main hallway. Ayla's presence inspired something new. Students who used to walk with their heads down now stood tall. The popular kids started walking a little slower. It wasn't about fear. It was about boundaries and respect. Even Logan avoided eye contact, serving disciplinary action, and for the first time staying silent. That fall in the courtyard hadn't just been physical, it was symbolic. Word spread to other schools. A teacher from a nearby district asked to visit the club. "I want to understand how you all made this happen." Ayla explained it simply. "We're not trying to be heroes. Just don't want to live in fear anymore." The teacher left with tears in her eyes. It was rare to find courage this clear, this young. Over time, more stories began to surface. Students shared things they'd lived through, but never dared to say out loud. Abuse, humiliation, years of forced silence. The group became a safe space, not just to learn self-defense, but to exist. And Ayla listened to it all. Not as the untouchable leader, but as someone who had survived too, and chose not to stay silent. That public high school, once filled with cold hallways and rigid rules, had changed its rhythm. Now there were pauses for listening, more eye contact, and above all, presence. And Ayla walked the way she always had, firm, quiet, steady. But now, around her, dozens walked in the same rhythm. The base wasn't just strong, it was alive.